welcome back everybody to another episode of Making Monsters. We're continuing on this draft series that we have, dwindling down to some of the final schools we're talking about, mainly around that potential number 10 pick, maybe if the Bears trade back, some possibilities, but also some later round guys too. And so we're going through a bunch of different schools, trying to get a little bit of an idea. There's no way I can go through all of them, but try to get through as many as I can. We're joined today by John Helbkamp. John, thank you for hopping on with me. I know you just got a new gig with Rivals, so congrats on that. But previous to that, you did cover Oregon and Buffalo Bills at certain times, so familiar with both of those. But the Oregon factor is why we're here today, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about some of these Oregon Ducks. There's several of them on my list that I think are appealing to the Bears in the sense of positional need. So this is where we kind of get to know if they are actually a fit for the Bears or if it's just that position. And so I want to start with the number one, Josh Conerly. I think that's one of the main ones that a lot of people are talking about. So the left tackle position is an interesting one with the Bears because some people think they're okay with Braxton Jones. Some people want to still invest in that left tackle position. So we will see what the Bears think and what Ben Johnson thinks in that, because obviously that position is very important for his offenses. But let's chat a little bit about Josh Conerly, his development through the time in college and at that left tackle position.
Yeah, Josh Conerly Jr. is a stud. I've been watching him really closely for a couple years and watching his continued development. You know, he's a 2-year starter from Oregon. He's an early declare. He's leaving as a junior this year. So his sophomore and junior season, he was full-time starter at left tackle, only allowed 2 sacks over the last 2 seasons. And probably his best performance was going up against Abdul Carter from Penn State, who many people are talking about as potential number 1 overall pick or top 4, or maybe a fit for Chicago, even if he's there. Which he's a fit anywhere. Abdul Carter's just a freak of nature. So he's going to fit fine. Yeah, he'll fit wherever he goes. But Josh Conerly Jr. in the Big Ten championship game, Dan Lanning approached him before the game and basically said, "I want you to erase Abdul Carter." And he went, "Wow, okay. Big task. That's fine. I can do that." And he basically pitched a shutout against Carter. I think he gave up maybe 1 pressure the whole game. So that was a real signature game for him. What I love about Connor is that he is very fluid, very athletic, has the size, has a good anchor. Being an Oregon guy, I was very familiar with him going into this last season and started talking about him as being a top 3, top 5 offensive tackle in this class very early in the year. So it's been fun over the last 6 months or so watching his stock kind of catch up to that opinion across the board consensus wise. So yeah, Conerly's got a lot of intrigue.
Yeah, I think you talk about somebody having to go head to head with Abdul Carter, and that's not an easy task to be given whatsoever. Being a Notre Dame fan, I saw even with one arm how difficult it was to go against Abdul Carter for that offensive line. So that is something that if you want to go back, and for anybody who wants to watch tape, probably go watch that game because it's something you'll get an idea with. When you talk about, I think part of this is, and when we talk about these offensive linemen coming to Chicago, it's going to be Ben Johnson, who does a lot of creative things, obviously, with the offensive linemen. But also Caleb Williams. He's a different type of quarterback. There's a lot of things a lot of movement, a lot of leaving the pocket, a lot of things like that he does, a more mobile quarterback. How do you think that will transfer for somebody like Josh Conerly when it comes to playing that left tackle position for a quarterback like that?
I actually think that that's a really interesting point, because if you look at the quarterbacks, while Conerly was at Oregon, it was Bo Nix for 2 years and then Dylan Gabriel this year. So you have quarterbacks that extend the plays, that roll out, that look to do things with their legs and while keeping their eyes downfield and looking for an available target. It's a lot of the same stuff that Caleb Williams likes to do. So I think that Conerly is very used to being flexible, to having that ability to have the eyes in the back of his head to know what his quarterback's doing and kind of paying attention to how the quarterback's going to move, when he's going to bail out of the pocket, when he's going to look to extend things, and knowing when to disengage with those defensive linemen so that you don't get that holding call when an edge decides to turn around and bolt off to the side because the quarterback's going that way. So I think that that's actually a really interesting fit, something that Conerly would be really adapt to. And not only that, but you went from a right-handed quarterback in Bo Nix to a left-handed in Dylan Gabriel. Yeah. So a lot of changing parts, a lot of movement behind him at the quarterback position that I think that he adapted really well to.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good point too. When you're talking about being able to flip, you're protecting somebody's blind side, and then you're not protecting somebody's blind side. So you're obviously approaching that differently as a left tackle in each of with those quarterbacks. I want to move on to one of my other top guys that I've heard a lot about. I've heard a lot of really really good things about this player today. I mean, in general. And then today I was talking to someone earlier who maybe isn't as high as some people on him, but that's Drake Harmon. I think that I love his story because when you go back, and I think it was Michigan State he started with and then hit the
Yep.
portal. So when you go from that, obviously when you're switching schools all of a sudden, you're learning new playbooks, you're learning new schemes, and some of it is, hey, was this new scheme and everything a factor into his ability to kind of take the sleep at Oregon? But a lot of people say it was a combination of that, but also just the developmental side of what Harmon was able to do at Oregon. So share a little bit about that, what you saw at his time from that moment he arrived from Michigan State from the portal to this the end of the season.
Yeah, his impact was huge when he came over from Michigan State to Oregon. It really did look like he leveled up. I think part of that was he was a part of a better defensive line in general, which is important. When you have good running mates, it makes everything easier for everybody. Oregon runs a four-man front, which I know is something that the Bears are going to be looking at doing too. So he's really natural there. But his development was great. The ability that he always had was the athleticism. But I think that that really unlocked when he got to Oregon because he shed some weight. And when he decided to cut some of that weight down, you saw his athleticism really start to shine through. And I think that combined with just better coaching across the board, combined with higher expectations, I think it really helped Harmon just burst onto the scene and really develop. He was one of the most disruptive defensive tackles in the country this last year.
Yeah.
I think he had the highest havoc rate of any defensive tackle when you take into effect like batted balls, sacks, pressures, tackles for loss, everything. He was constantly in the backfield. So I think that Harmon took a massive step. Um, Early first would be too rich. If he's on the board for you guys in the second, I think that that's a great fit there. But I am seeing a lot of love for him going between the 20s and into the late first. So I think
Yeah.
that he's probably going to go somewhere in that range. Selfishly, I'm a Buffalo Bills guy, and I would love that pick at 30 if he's on the board. But I think that Derek Harmon is gonna have a happy home in the NFL somewhere.
Where do you think his best fit on that defensive line is? Because that's where the conversation would come in with Chicago, obviously. I think right now it's Javon Dexter, Andrew Billings right there. Andrew Billings is kind of the forefront to the stopping the run on our defense. Javon Dexter is maybe the one getting a little more pressures, getting to the quarterback. So, and we've kind of pushed Javon Dexter into that true three tech, but it's a lot. He's kind of able to play both. Andrew Billings is kind of towards the end of his career. So what they kind of do with that will be interesting. But where do you see him fitting best on that defensive line?
I think that he has the flexibility to do just about everything. I think that he probably is best suited for a three tech. I think that that's where I would probably call him because of his athleticism and his size. And that's where we saw him flourish this last year. It was Jamari Caldwell, who was a nose tackle. He was the one taking on the double teams while Derek Harmon was getting a lot of one-on-one reps. And when he was doing that, he was very disruptive. He was winning a lot in that role. So I think that that three tech or even lining up directly over the tackle, we even saw him kick out onto the edge on a couple of plays, and he did really well out there too. So he has flexibility to move up and down the line, which is great.
Yeah.
It's more opportunities for him to get on the field if you have an injury or something along those lines. But I think that his natural position is probably at a three tech with him, maybe even continuing to shed down his weight a little bit to continue to up that athleticism and that quick twitch.
Yeah, it will be interesting because the Bears added two guys this last on free agency, which is Grady Jarrett and then Dio Ojingbo, and that's added to obviously Montez Sweat is going to be on one side. And for me, what I'm kind of picturing is I think we are going to see a lot of movement across the line because they brought in a lot of guys who can play multiple positions on the defensive line, and so somebody like that, a Derek Harmon, I think fits great in that mold. I also think he fits the mold kind of what Dennis Allen likes in his defensive linemen too, and what they can and can't do. You mentioned Jamari Caldwell. That's another guy I wanted to talk about. When you talk about that nose tackle, they talk about the size, the quickness, all of those things. Maybe a little bit of struggles against the run, but when you're talking about all of the other things that he's able to do, and moments being able to get to the backfield, maybe that some of that has to be developed. But what do you see out of him at the next level too, in the fit of where his probably strengths will fit the most in the NFL level?
Yeah, I think that he's a true nose tackle. He's in that 340-pound range. He's a big boy. Being able to be that true one tech, either lined up directly over the center in that A gap, is definitely his home with that size. He did have a really good pass rush win rate for his size, even though it didn't show up into a lot of counting stats. He
Mhm.
did show a lot of ability to be disruptive and to be able to collapse the pocket and push guys back and beat them with even a spin move at his size. So he definitely has ability there. His tackling is probably the one thing that needs to be improved on. He had a missed tackle rate of, I think it was around 20%. So that's
Mhm.
pretty high.
Yeah.
Don't love that for him, but that's why he's being looked at as a day 3 prospect right now, not as an
Yeah.
early round guy. But in terms of the upside that he has with the size, with the athleticism, with the ability to collapse pocket, anchor against double teams, really just kind of muck up the middle and allow other guys to kind of clean up and get stuff done. I think that he's got a lot of upside as a day 3 player.
Yeah.
I think you could even make an argument for him potentially as a late round 3 guy for teams that are right there at the end of the 3rd round. But if he's on the board early 4th, where Chicago, I think they have a 4th. Does Chicago have a 4th round pick this year? I can't remember their picks offhand.
Yeah, I'm
But
honestly terrible about it of remembering exactly what I know. We have
yeah,
2 twos. We might honestly not have a fourth. It might be 2 twos,
okay.
a third, and then we have to skip the 4th round, I think.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting draft class because the the varied takes on where these guys are going to go is all over the place. You can have
Yeah.
someone talked about in the 3rd round that might not get drafted until the 5th or something along those lines. It's going to be a little all over the place. But I think the upside is definitely there as someone that can step in as a nose tackle, muddy things up, really clog up that middle and not get pushed off the ball. I think that
Yeah.
he has some really good traits there as a true nose tackle.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm going to continue on, which shows why the Oregon defensive line was talked about so much, because this is going to be the 3rd defensive lineman that I'll be talking about. But Jordan Burch is another one. And I think that, first of all, I read a stat about him that says he weighs in around 300 pounds, but he's clocked a 21 mile per hour at certain points in games, which insane to think about. That is a
Yeah.
guy that obviously with the size and the speed, and when you're wanting him to get to a quarterback, that's probably some important thing. So Jordan Burch, and when you talk about finding that body size was a big thing when you read about him, of him finding that exact, like what worked for him. And sometimes we see the guys fluctuate through their time in college trying to find out, like when they're playing certain positions, what weight they can play the best in. It seems like he started finding that this last year, because he really made a lot of impact in a lot of ways. But I want to go just to that area, what he did in Oregon this last season and what you were able to see from Jordan Burch, because I feel like that is something when you go back, that when you're watching film, this last season is probably what you're going to want to watch from him.
Yeah, I think that Jordan Burch is still a bit of a ball of clay.
Yeah.
He's incredibly athletic, like you said, being tracked at 21 miles an hour. The play that's going to pop up whenever he gets drafted on NFL Network, when they put it up on the screen, is the fake punt that Dan Lanning called, where he got the ball to Burch. It was a direct snap to a defensive end lined up in the backfield, and he rumbled and juked some guys to pick up like 30 yards. Like, he's just a freak athletically. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list last summer as like the most athletic, college football players in the country. I think he is still trying to find his weight. Last summer, the reports were, oh, he's 285. Oh, he's 290. Oh, he's 295. Oh, he's 298. And he's this huge guy. And then he shows up to the combine and he weighed in at 279. So it's like, where are you? I still don't know. I don't think he knows what his best trade is going to be. I think with the athleticism that he has, I would keep it down there around 275, 280. I think that he has so much juice as a speed rusher. And you're saying down at 275. That's still a big edge. You've got a lot of these prospects are 240, 250. So he still has a ton of size to him and that ability to not get pushed around. But there are still some rough edges that need to be refined a little bit. Sometimes I don't think that he always has a great plan for his pass rush, and plays just kind of get stalled out. But other times when he does come in clearly with a set plan, or he knows what he's going to attack, or he figures out what the weakness is that he can attack on the opposing offensive lineman, he jumps off the tape. I mean, he has the ability to be an absolutely disruptive, potentially Pro Bowl defensive end type guy. He has that much natural ability and length and speed and all of the traits. He just still needs some coaching to put it together. He kind of reminds me a little bit of like Greg Rousseau, who's just so juiced up athletically. He has the size. He's still a bit of a project. Maybe someone loves him and takes him late first. He's probably going day 2. But I think that with the right coaching and with the with the traits that he has, this is a ball of clay where a team's going to look at him and go, I can work with that. And we're going to make him into a really effective pass rusher, probably as a rotational guy to start, but as someone that can really get after a quarterback.
Yeah, it's interesting. This edge class to me is very weird because I feel like a lot of people who are mocking, if there's any edge that people are mocking at 10 to the Bears, it keeps being Shamar Stewart, which terrifies me because it reminds me of similar where it is. I know, shaking your head. It's like,
no,
it's just so messy. He's not there. And everybody, I read a quote and I've said this on multiple podcasts because it stuck out to me so much, but a former scout made a comment saying this is like the typical player that you can say has no idea how to play football. Like he has all the athleticism, all the physical tools, has the size that you want, but does not know where he's on the football field. All the mechanics aren't there. That terrifies me. So if someone like that is going at 10, it's interesting to me that a guy like this, who kind of is like in a similar role, is looking at more probably like 100-ish on a lot of draft boards.
Yeah.
I
think that Birch has way more polish to his game and way more understanding than a Shamar Stewart, but people just gawk over Shamar Stewart's athleticism. Yeah. He is the ultimate ball of clay. There's nothing there from a production standpoint at all. 2 sacks in his entire college career?
Yeah.
Jordan Birch missed a handful of games this last season with an injury, but I think that he had 8 sacks or something like that in 9 games. I'm trying to remember the exact number, so don't quote me on that. Yeah. But he was very productive. He was able to get after the quarterback in big spots. He was very disruptive. Just a true edge with size and with speed and with length, who also is strong enough and big enough to not get bullied around off the corner. So I would take Birch over Shamar Stewart in a vacuum straight up because Jordan Birch is a better football player. And Shamar Stewart, you're either getting an all-pro edge or he's not getting a second contract. And I don't know which one it's going to be. And that scares the crap out of me. So yeah,
especially at 10. And that's what, when I was talking to even the Texas A&M guy, he said he's either going to get a GM fired or a GM erased. And that's kind of like where it is with Shamar Stewart right now, which terrifies me. You don't risk a 10 on that. I personally, and I know there's off the field stuff aside, I like Mike Green more than I do Shamar Stewart. And a lot of people aren't talking about him nearly as much. And I know there's other things that kind of are factoring into that right now, but let's talk about some of the offensive side of the ball. Terrence Ferguson, tight end, more of the receiving type of tight end. Is that how you would describe him?
Yeah, he's definitely a mover of a tight end. He's not a natural inline blocking tight end. So that receiving ability is great. Sometimes struggles a little bit at the catch point and in traffic a little bit, like when there's contested catch situations, but he has such a good ability to uncover, and he's so athletic after the catch. Oregon loves running tight end screens. It's something that they do quite a bit of. And Ferguson was a benefactor of that quite a bit, but he also was a great downfield threat too. So being able to attack multiple levels, very good. I think that his contested catch ability really took a step forward in the second half of this season. So I think that was something that we did see some growth in. I think people are still kind of knocking him a little bit too much for that. But Ferguson is a very efficient, productive mover of a tight end. I heard multiple Big Ten national broadcasts this year refer to him a little bit in the Travis Kelce mold. And I was like, that is bold. What a comp. Let's just comp him to the greatest tight end to ever play the game.
Yeah.
But he's someone that I think has a lot of upside. He looked great at the Senior Bowl, made some really good contested catches down there, which was nice to see him kind of putting that narrative to bed a little bit with some of the stuff he was doing. And then he tested out of the water with his athletic testing at the combine. So I think there's a lot of love for him on day 2 right now. And as a receiving tight end in the league, he's not a do everything. He's not your George Kittle that's going to line up and pancake guys into the dirt. That's not what you're going to get out of Terrence Ferguson. But as a pure pass catching, quarterback friendly tight end, I think he fits that role.
Yeah, I think that if you're looking for Chicago with tight ends, a lot of the ones you have to, like, they have Cole Kmet. So Cole Kmet is going to be the tight end number 1. And people go back to what Ben Johnson did in Detroit, which is a lot of 12 personnel. Granted, we say that 30% of 12 personnel is still getting Brock Wright only like 16 targets. So how high do you want to take a tight end? But you also want that tight end to mesh to where you feel like they can be kind of well-rounded, because I think you will need one in a lot more blocking schemes and stuff like that. And because you're not going to, Cole Kmet's that's not really his strength. So he's going to be the one probably catching the ball a lot. So when we look at tight ends in Chicago, it's interesting to me. I like to see the ones that maybe would fit that 12 personnel that Ben Johnson could run. I'm not sure about this just because I think he can do a little bit of everything, but maybe not at the highest level that he'd be asked to do it in that type of scheme.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the best fit for him, if I'm just being perfectly blunt. I love Terrence Ferguson. He's the Oregon Duck all-time record holder for receptions and receiving yards by a tight end. So he's going down as, one of the best tight ends of all time. Super nice guy, great teammate. Like, a lot of the off-field stuff, you're going to love him. He's so personable. He just looks like a teddy bear. Like, everyone loves him. But I don't know if that's the best fit. I think that you guys need someone that can block a little bit better than Fergie can in Chicago. That's probably what I would recommend, especially for those running schemes. Now, Oregon runs the ball a lot too, and Ferguson was able to kind of chip in here and there, but he's not incredibly strong at it. Like, he's not someone that's going to be out in front and collapsing down on some of the top, pass rushers in the league to set the edge in the run game. I just don't think that's his strong point.
So let's move to the other weapon, Tez Johnson. There's a lot of, I feel like the main reason he's not probably talked about a little higher is his size. He's a smaller guy, and that's going to factor into a lot of people's evaluation. But what type of receiver do you see him being at the next level, especially with that size in mind?
Yeah, he's a slot all day. Also a very good punt returner. That's something that he was asked to do a lot at Oregon. So that's a way I think that he can get on the field early in the NFL. People want to knock him for his size quite a bit, but he only missed 2 games in his entire college career due to injury. He's tough as nails. You'd see him take big hits all the time on the sideline and just pop right back up. No limp, no nothing. He reminds me a little bit of like Devonta Smith in that way. Like, everyone, and Devonta Smith has 20 pounds on Tez. That shows you how small Tez Johnson is. But everyone wanted to knock Devonta Smith and say he's too small and he's not physical enough. And he just continues to hang with much bigger defenders. Tez Johnson is a little bit that way for me. The 40 time hurt, like, I'm not going to lie, that really sucked to see. But his play speed is a lot higher than that. I don't know what happened with the 40, because he pulls away from defenders all the time. He's able to take any catch and put on the jets and break it for a long play. Maybe that's something to do with just the angles that he knows instinctually in terms of how to create space from defenders when he has the ball in his hands. I'm not sure. But Tez Johnson is a very reliable slot wide receiver who is an absolute jitterbug. He is so shifty in and out of his breaks. He was putting on a clinic in Mobile in terms of just dusting cornerbacks on the one-on-ones, which obviously favored the wide receiver. But he really showcased that insane ability to get in and out of breaks and create separation for himself. So as a slot, as a third option on a team, someone that can contribute in punt return, I think that he has a role in the NFL. He's not a superstar wide receiver, but I think that he's someone that can come in and definitely make a difference. He and Tank Dell are super close as individuals. So he's learning a lot from Tank. Just don't ask him to block on a run play at the goal line like they did with Tank Dell. But other than that, I think that Tez Johnson, I think the world of him as an athlete, as a competitor, as a person, has a very checkered backstory when he was a kid and overcame all that and went on to just great things. Wanted to be a Duck his entire childhood. He's Bo Nix's, brother. Not technically, they didn't adopt him, but he moved in with them when he was a kid. Like, just a great story, great kid. I'm rooting for him. Absolutely. And I think that he can be a really good slot. I really do.
So maybe we see a little Bo Nix and Tez uniting at the next level. Let me ask you this, because I had a conversation with someone a couple months ago. Obviously, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze are going to be your wide receivers 1 and 2 in this offense. Cole Kmet, we're hoping, comes back to being a big piece, because it was something Shane Waldron, for some reason, just neglected Cole Kmet all year, and it was a little frustrating for a lot of Bears fans. I was talking to someone a couple months ago, and they were telling me that the best maybe type of receiver that the Bears could add to it would be a slot guy. They said a Christian Kirk. Would you say that he's Christian Kirk-esque at all?
I don't really see that as much of a comp, but it's also just really hard to put a comp on Tez because of his body. Like, his size is so uniquely small. I mean, there's no denying that if he's going to be successful in the NFL, he's an outlier. He's the smallest wide receiver to ever go through the NFL Combine. He's tiny, but it's one of those things where he's he's struggled to put on weight his entire life. Like he's continuously been looking to bulk. He has a private chef right now that's trying to help him add size. But at the same time, this is just what he's going to be. I don't think he's ever going to be more than 170 pounds soaking wet, even in an NFL weight room and personal chef and all that stuff. I just don't think you're going to see him get much bigger than that. So it's really hard to put a comp on Tez Johnson other than Tank Dell because they're both so small. It's hard. I don't know. I think that he's just his own kind of unique slot wide receiver. And there's going to be a lot of teams that probably don't have him on the board just because of his size. But if they think that he's someone that can come in as someone that can just eat on the underneath, and they do have the wide receivers on the outside to take the top off defenses. So that gives him space to operate underneath against nickels and against linebackers and stuff like that. I think that is probably one of the best fits for him in the NFL, is where there are strong outside wide receivers that are going to command so much of that attention.
So, John, before I let you go, I want to get to, there's a long list of Oregon Ducks we could talk about. We can't get to every single one of them. So are there any other that you really like that are heading into this draft? And when you scroll through, we talked about a good amount of them, but obviously Jeffrey Boss is one of them. Dylan Gabriel, we don't really have to talk about that one, but Johnny Cornelius is another one. Nico Reed's another one. Trayshawn Holden. Any of those guys that kind of you feel like should be talked about a little more, or you like enough to give me like, hey, look out for this guy during draft weekend?
Yeah, I don't know how much as a Chicago Bears fit directly, but I don't know why Jabbar Muhammad's not getting more love at corner. He is so sticky and so aggressive, like at the catch point, and he just annoys opposing wide receivers, and you love that in a cornerback. So I don't know how much Chicago's looking to add another corner into the room, but he is someone that I think deserves a lot more love than he's getting. He did a great job at the Shrine Bowl. He was at University of Washington first before transferring to Oregon. So going from hated rival to hated rival in the Pacific Northwest is a really fun story. But, in practice up there at Washington, he went against Roma Dunze all the time. He went against, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk. He went against great wide receivers there. When Oregon's offense with Bo Nix and Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson were tearing up everybody 2 years ago, it was Jabbar Muhammad who basically locked up Troy Franklin and didn't let him do anything. So he's just a nuisance of a corner that's super physical at the catch point, great at playing the ball in the air, breaking up passes, stuff like that. I just think the world of him as a corner, as someone that's likely going on day 3. I don't think there's any chance he goes higher than that at this point, but I think that he's going to be a steal. I mean, this is someone that could step in and be a starting nickel, in my opinion, at the NFL level. I think that he's just a really, really talented corner.
Yeah, I think he's maybe the size is also what people are looking at that, but it's sometimes you do have to just turn the film on, and it's like, just watch the tape and you'll see. We talk about all the guys, the offensive tackles and stuff that are up top right now, and they're saying, oh, their arms are too short. And Will Campbell's like, okay, can you just go watch and not tell me my arms are too short? So we have those conversations. This is that time of year when all the little spray charts of size start to come into everybody when you're trying to draft profile, because you can't watch everything, or most people can't watch everything. But John, I really appreciate it. This was great. I know there's a ton of Oregon Ducks that may go, but I try to hit as many as we can that fit the Bears needs and kind of meshes in with what we've been talking about. So I appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll chat again, because there's a lot more draft content, especially right after that, I'm sure we can talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to come back. Let me know anytime.
All right, perfect. Have a good day.
Cool. Thanks.